Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 2 of week 4, and the topic of today's lecture is the critique of capitalism. So before I begin my lecture, I would like to discuss with you the concepts and the topics to be covered in this today's lecture. Now the first is features of capitalist society. Second, the attractiveness of capitalism. Third is exploitation of capitalism, and this we will study with the help of surplus value. Then role of alienation and what is the significance of money increasing the alienation of people in the society. Then criticisms of the Western capitalist society from Marxist point of view. Then crisis within capitalism and what is the international character of revolution. Now these concepts will be covered from Marxist perspective. So, to begin with, I would like to first explain how Karl Marx has defined capitalism. Now, he has defined capitalism as a type of economic system where the society was divided into two groups, and the first group was the proletariat and the second was the bourgeois. Now, there was private ownership of property, and bourgeois was the owner of the means of production, which was capital, but they were small in number. On the other hand, the proletariat, they did not possess any capital and were forced to sell their labor to earn wages, but they were large in number. So we can see that according to Karl Marx, the capitalist society was divided into two classes. One class, which was small in number, had access to private property. They acquired lots of capital, and through that capital they acquired other forms of property, and they had control over the means of production. They had all the control over the economic system, whereas the proletariats, who lost their control over the land because of various reasons, who lost their control over the capital, they had only one thing with them, and that was their labor. It was their labor which actually they can sell off to earn money and to earn their livelihood. So such was the division of the capitalist society into two classes. And Marx said that if we study the historical development of human society, we find that except the primitive communism or the first stage of human evolution, we find that in every stages of human history, our society has been divided into two classes in terms of economic production. And so, in the case of capitalist society also, he said that one of the important feature of capitalist society is that there has to be existence of a proletariat class who earns wages, and along with that there is also need of another class, that is capitalist class, which is having access to capital. Now, what was the relationship between this proletariat and capitalist? Now, obviously, since the proletariat, they did not possess any property and they also did not have any capital. They had only one thing, and that was their labor. So they sold their labor to the capitalist and they worked for the capitalist and earned the wages. And unfortunately, these wages were only to somehow maintain the existence of the proletariat, or they were, in other words, merely the subsistence wages or the wages which can just sustain the individual. And because of such type of structure and processes, he had to undergo various forms of suffering in the society, and therefore Karl Marx has made the critique of capitalist system of production from various perspectives, and he has explained the manifold effects or the manifold evil effects of capitalist structure on the individual lives and on our society. So we will see in much more detail in the subsequent slides the effect of capitalism on individual or on the proletariats. Now, as we have said that the proletariat, since they have lost control over the property, so they had no other choice to become dependent on the capitalist to earn wages. and therefore this relationship of dependency led to opening of the sources of exploitation. Now, before we go into various criticisms which has been advanced by Karl Marx against the capitalist system of production, I would like to mention that Karl Marx has also mentioned some of the positive features of capitalism, or in other words you can say he has mentioned or explained many of the attractive features of capitalism which has not only attracted it to so many people and countries across the world, but also it has helped in expanding the capitalist system of production across different countries of the world. So, I would like to explain all these features one by one. I think the first important feature which was explained by Karl Marx also was it used highly developed means of production. And when we talk about the means of production, it includes labor, capital and so many other things which are required for carrying out the task of production. But with the advent of science and technology during that period, we know that the most important means of production at that stage was technology, was the use of science. And with the help of technology, there was unprecedented increase in industrial production, and this growth of industrial production, it led to so much of progress and increase in standards of the living conditions of human society, and especially in the Western society we can find the impact of industrial revolution, the impact of use of technology for mass scale production on the lives of the people. So, one of the important attraction, and I think this is the most important attraction of capitalism, that it promised high levels of growth. And it not only promised high levels of growth, but it also in reality brought about high levels of growth and development. But the question is that who got the benefits from this type of development? Because the progress took place, the industrial production increased, but who got the benefits? That was a question which we will explore soon. And the second important feature of capitalism which made its relevance or continuance very attractive was it was in constant need of raw material, labor and market to expand. I would say that the nature of capitalism is expansive in nature. And since it is expansive in nature, hence it needs more raw material, it needs more labor, it needs more market to expand. And since in order to grow, it needs more such the means of production or the raw material, so it has to go beyond its territorial boundaries. And we can find that in reality also it happened. It spread to other countries, or the capitalist country was in search of markets in other countries around the world. They started searching for raw materials, they accessed the cheap labor of other countries, and we all know that it all started in the form of colonialism and imperialism. Now, with this transfer of raw material, with the availability of market, the expansion of capitalism became very easy, or you can say that it is one of the inevitable condition or inevitable feature or consequence of capitalism, that it will expand, and for expansion it needs more resources, and for more resources it has to spread beyond its boundaries, or it has to spread to other countries in search of raw materials and in search of market. Now, the third important feature of capitalism, one of the important impact of capitalism was it led or it started the process of urbanization, because in countries where the industries or factories were established, they became the urban center and they started making developments. They were much faster in comparison to those areas where there was no factories or where there was no industry. Along with the establishment of industry, those areas also developed in terms of more educational facilities, in terms of hospital facilities. In every respect it developed, and people started slowly migrating from the rural areas to urban areas, or in other words, it led to the division of rural and urban areas. Since the availability of facilities or employment opportunities were more concentrated in the urban areas because of the establishment of industries, so naturally there was a migration of population from the rural areas to urban areas in search of more opportunities, in search of employment, in search of other facilities. So one way the urbanization created various new opportunities for the people, but at the same time it also created number of miseries also. It also created many important problems of urbanization, or which were associated with the process of urbanization or the ill effects of modernization. Now, after understanding the features of a capitalist society, or how we can make a distinction of capitalist society from other societies from the Marxist perspective, now we see that how Karl Marx explained the exploitation of capitalism. Now, Karl Marx explained the capitalism, or he explained the exploitation of capitalism through his theory of surplus value. Now, we must understand what Karl Marx meant by surplus value. Surplus value is the difference between the wages paid to the laborer and the final price for which the product was sold. So, it was the difference between the final price of the product and the actual wages which was being given to the proletariat, and the difference between it was the surplus value or the profit. This surplus value or profit was completely acquired by the capitalist. A very small portion or tiny portion of such surplus value was spent on the proletariat, and the proletariat was supposed to work for long hours under inhuman conditions, and there was also no factory laws or industrial laws regulate the working condition or their working hours. They were also having no access to various facilities or various security provisions which we today find associated with the working in industries. So, because of the absence of any such provisions to protect the rights of the workers, they were exploited. They had to work for so many long hours. And also in this we find that there was also an element of gender discrimination. Men and women were paid differently for the same amount of work done. So, therefore, we can see that there were numerous shades of the exploitation on account of the surplus value. And as we know that as the capitalist or as the capitalism expands or as it grows, it leads to the production of more and more surplus value. But the wages of the proletariat, it remains constant. The exploitation increases because they have to work for longer hours, they have to work more harder, but they are not being paid more for the extra hours which they are giving for the production. And the result is that they come to a point that they cannot bear anymore. The exploitation increases to such an extent that it reaches a breaking point. Now, another important consequence of exploitation, as we have already discussed when we were talking about the critical traditions and critical theory in week 1, in various slides and lectures, I have discussed that how alienation is another important consequence or impact of the capitalist mode of production. So, Karl Marx made a criticism of capitalist system of production from two perspectives. One was how in terms of economic production, in terms of economic exploitation and individuals' rights were violated, how he was deprived of his economic rights, how because of the absence of access to right to private property, he could not enjoy his rights, he could not enjoy his independence. So, therefore, he mentioned in great detail the economic aspects of exploitation, and that was his first critique. And the second critique of Karl Marx was the alienation. If we remember what is the meaning of alienation, then we know that alienation is estrangement. That means the individual becomes stranger to himself. He becomes disconnected from his own self, from the processes of production, from the product which he is producing, and he is also getting disconnected from his fellow beings and from the society at large. So, there are multiple levels of alienation. Then another way in which we can understand alienation is to lose control over oneself. It is not only understood in terms of loss of power over oneself, but it is also loss of control over one's creation. Individual or human beings have become enslaved to the creations which he has actually made. He has lost his conscious control over the products which he has made. So, therefore, we will see in the subsequent slides, or maybe in the lecture 3, in much more detail the various types of alienation in the society. So, therefore, here when we are talking about the critique of capitalism, we have to understand that alienation occurs when workers lost control over the production process. We will see in the next lecture how in multifarious ways a worker or a proletariat loses control over the production process. He is working from morning to evening. He is working without taking any rest. He is being paid so less, but in spite of his contribution in terms of labor and time to the production process, what we find is that he is not at all connected. He does not feel himself connected with the production process. And the irony is that he is not even able to identify himself with the final product which is produced by him. And there are various reasons behind why he is not able to identify with the final product. And we will discuss all these reasons in our next slide or in the next lecture. Now, why alienation is taking place? Why people are getting disconnected from his own essence, or we can say why they are getting disconnected from the human essence, why they are getting estranged from their fellow beings, why they are not able to enjoy their life. We find that one of the important reasons pointed out by Karl Marx was the increasing importance given to money in the modern society. The money has acquired an omnipotent position. It has acquired a value which is much superior and higher than the values which are attached to other things of life or other aspects of life, and that includes even the human beings, and it includes also the nature of which human beings are part. So, human beings have created money, human beings are its creator, but we can see the evil result is that human beings have himself become slave to the money. Money is today ruling the world of human society. Money has become omnipotent. Money has taken a transcendental position over all other aspects of human life, or you can say a meaningful human life. So, such is the importance of money, and if you relate what Karl Marx has said during the 19th century with the modern society in the 21st century, we find that his prophecy was 100% true, because in the present society we see how money is ruling every aspect of our thinking, activities and processes. Money has taken precedence over all other aspects of human lives or human activity or endeavor. That this importance or over importance to money has led to the development of a phenomena which Karl Marx has said, the process of commodity fetishism. Before we go further, we must understand what we mean by commodity fetishism. Commodity fetishism means that social relations are reduced to economic relations of production and exchange. Among whom? Among things like money and merchandise, and not as relationship between people. See the shift which has taken place. In the pre-capitalist society, our relationship was not based on money or merchandise only. It was more of a social relationship involving human beings. Human being was the center or the primary unit of our relationship. Or in other words, human being or human relationship were more important than the economic relationship. But now economic relationship has replaced human relationship and it is being counted or termed as our new type of social relationship. And this relationship is based on exchange or a type of relation or production based on exchange of money and merchandise. So, now this transformation is extremely alarming and it had led to lots of consequences for starting or for occurrence of the process of alienation. Everything has been reduced to a commodity which can be purchased and sold in the market with the help of money. If you have money, you can purchase anything in this world. So, such is the meaning and understanding of commodity fetishism. Now, we come to some of the important criticisms which Karl Marx has made regarding modern industrial society. First of all, he began his arguments by questioning some of the fundamental assumptions of the Western industrial society. Now, we know that the process of capitalism or the capitalism itself, it began with lots of hopes and promises. And there were many assumptions and there were many hopes and aspirations. And some of these aspirations has been criticized by Karl Marx because they proved to be false hope. They could not get translated into practice or they could not achieve the goals for which it triggered a hope in the mind of individual. And one such assumption was that individuals will develop their potentialities through satisfying labor. It was believed that because it was an age of individual equality and individual rights, individual's rationality was the basis on which individual was being considered as equal. So, obviously there was talk about human potentiality, and it was believed that individuals can develop their potentiality through satisfying labor. If they get access to satisfying labor or if they are able to labor in environment which gives them satisfaction, then individual can develop his or her personality. And the second assumption was that how this rewarding labor can be provided? It can be provided by the industrial system. Now, the capitalist system of production will provide opportunities which will create such rewarding conditions for labor, but unfortunately it did not happen. Similarly, the third promise or assumption was that it will percolate down to the lower level. As it will grow, it will percolate down to the lower level and ultimately it will improve the conditions of the people who are at the lower rung of the society. But what happened in reality? In reality, it led to more inequalities, it led to more oppression and exploitative practices. Now, another very important thing which Karl Marx added to these criticism when he said that as capitalism is expansive in nature, it will spread to other countries for raw materials and market, which will increase productivity and surplus value. So, it is very clear that as the capitalism will expand, it will lead to more growth and it will lead to more surplus value. But this increase in surplus value will also be appropriated by the capitalist, which will lead to further deterioration of the conditions of proletariat. I have already explained this point in my earlier slide, so I am not going into the detail of this. Now, because of these continuing tensions, that is the lowering of the wages, the rise in the inflation and the increase in profit of the capitalist will lead to heightened tension between the bourgeois and the proletariat, which will take the shape of a class struggle or a struggle between the two classes, that is proletariat and bourgeois, finally paving the way for revolution and destruction of capitalism. Now, this was termed by Karl Marx as the crisis within capitalism, because he said, and I have already mentioned in my earlier slides, that Karl Marx has rightly said that the capitalism contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction, and as it is now, it is very clear that how it contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction. Now, this was termed by Karl Marx, as I have said, a crisis within capitalism. So, now the last criticism which he said, that the revolution which will take place against capitalism will be international in nature, because capitalism has spread across the world. Hence, he urged the workers of all countries to unite, because they have nothing to lose but their chain. And this revolution will lead to overthrow of capitalist class, abolition of private property and establishment of collective ownership of property through socialism. So, now like other lectures, I have given a set of activity questions which are based on what we have learned in today's lecture. And there are certain points or questions I have put before you to steer your imagination, so that you can think and you develop your own understanding and reasons about the points which I have raised in this lecture. Now, some of the questions which I have raised and I have asked you to think about this is, do you think that private ownership of property should be completely abolished in society? If you think yes, then you must give reasons, or if you think no, then also you must give reasons. Second, do you feel that there is relevance of Marxist theory in understanding present society? So, that is up to you to decide, because now you know what is Marxism and you also know what is the present conditions of our society. Then you can make a correlation and develop your own understanding. Third, do you believe that economic inequalities affect exercise of political and social rights? So, these are some of the questions I have put before you to steer your imagination and thinking. So, with this note, I come to the end of this lecture, and thank you very much.